Alright, so, here. Welcome everyone. This is the Eastern Front, but very simplified. So, I've decided that because I have vast knowledge of World War II, and, whatnot, I thought I would share some of it. Um, so, I will be covering mostly the Eastern Front, and later, hopefully, I'll be able to cover the rest of the war, Western Front, Pacific, um, and other things you know, zooming into very specific things. As of right now, I'm gonna try to get through the entirety of the Eastern Front, but within like a reasonable amount of time. So I'm gonna skip a little bit ahead. Basically, I'm gonna do a quick summary. Basically, World War One just happened. Everything's awful. Russian Civil War. Everything's dying. But oh wait, the Nazis have shown up and they're fixing Germany. Everything is great now. Except it really isn't because now they just annexed Austria and now they're pushing into other countries and things are looking bad. Czechoslovakia is gone. That's basically the summary of what's going on. So I'm going to be picking up right the Battle of Kakongal, which was a battle between the Soviet Union and the puppet state of Japan, of Manchukuo, right? No, sorry, Manchuria. Sorry, I got that wrong. Of Manchuria in Mongolia. It wasn't a very important battle, but it is still important enough to cover and one that's kind of skipped over by most of history. So I would like to say I apologize. I had to take all of this from not pages, crap, slides. Um, I, I can't think of what it's called. Keynote. That's what I'm trying to think of. So it's not going to look great, but it gets the information across. I didn't want to make a new slideshow for this. Um, so Battle of Kakangal. Basically, what ends up happening is Mongolia, which is now or as of this moment, a puppet to the Soviet Union because they declared war on the Soviet Union. Because why not? After the end of World War One, during the Russian Civil War. So they were put in. Well, they weren't actually annexed. They were put in as a puppet state under the Soviets. A bunch of their herdsmen were going out, and they crossed a border into Manchuria. Wasn't really a big deal. What shouldn't have gone anywhere, but the Manchurians, or sorry, the Manchukians. I don't know how you'd say it. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say the Japanese, but you understand what I'm talking about. So the Japanese took this as an act of aggression and whatnot. So they fired upon upon the Mongolians, and the Mongolians fired back. And there was a little skirmish, right? Nothing too crazy. Wasn't that big, but there was an issue. The Japanese wanted to expand. And so they saw this as basically an excuse to go to war. And, it wasn't a full-on war, but it was still a skirmish. And it was still quite a few battles, and it still was quite an important battle, and just showed everything. Sorry, I gotta. Okay. And just showed the importance of the strength of the Soviet Union, and showed, especially to the world, rather those who paid attention to this battle, because a lot of people didn't, the importance of combined arms. Though that really wouldn't be used by the Soviets until quite later on in the war, because they're the Soviets and they had to make sure that everything was right, and it's complicated purging. So basically, what ends up happening is the Soviets send Zhukov, who at this point isn't really that important. He was kind of a low rank, but they send him over, and they plan on him being able to, oh, excuse me, to defeat them, but not very swiftly. But they gave him not really that much. They gave him some tanks, they gave him some infantry, and at this time the Soviets combined their Air Force and the Red Army into one. So they sent over, obviously, some planes, some artillery, and basically just the basics. So, as you can see by this picture, this is a bunch of Soviet troops and a BT-5. The BT-5 was, at that point, was their best light tank that they had. It was really effective. He's a speedy little boy. I think go ridiculously fast. So the big defining moment of the battle is when Zhukov and the Japanese meet on this river crossing, and that goes into a big vast field, and Zhukov just decimates them. Like, there's nothing left. He sends in everything he has, and like I said, he shows the importance of combined warfare. He's able to use his planes, artillery, tanks, and normal infantry in such a way that it can just completely decimate the Japanese. And the Soviets had a bit of an advantage. The Japanese really weren't prepared for this, but at the same time, the Japanese didn't have to send their troops halfway across the world, basically. Like, the Soviets had to send their troops really far away, and they did not have home territory advantage. So in reality, the Japanese had a lot, but the Soviets, in reality, did have an upper hand because of the equipment that they had. But they were just able to completely wipe them out, completely off the map. Not really, but they were able to just wipe out the Japanese and Manchukian forces. Um, and though this really isn't this like crazy battle, this isn't like Stalingrad or Moscow or D-Day or something like that. It's still important to see the advancements of how war had changed. Obviously, because if you look at World War One, the slowness of that warfare is ridiculous. Like, I think that's one of the big things that defines it. And obviously, it wasn't the same as the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front did have a lot of movement. Cavalry was actually effective. You had the Tsar tank being invented. Like, there was a lot of movement on the Eastern Front. I guess the Tsar tank isn't a great example of a lot of movement, but it still was a lot more movement than, say, the Western Front. So it really does show how much warfare had changed and the effectiveness of using this new combined arms that could be achieved using tanks and mechanized infantry and the whatnot. So that's the big thing of that. But then obviously we take a step back over to the West. At this time, Stalin had just taken power. He had this he kind of in some ways was kind of like Peter the Great. In which he saw that the West was the best way to expand, and obviously after the Russian Civil War, as I hope you know, the Soviets lost a lot of territory, namely Poland. Same thing with Germany. Like, they arguably lost Ukraine and the Baltic states and Finland and all that, but they didn't really take a lot of that. But Poland and Finland were both big thorns in their side because they hadn't been able to take. Well, same thing with the Baltic states; they weren't able to reconquer those. So which actually they almost did, but I'll get into that. I'll probably have a pre-World War II Soviet Union history video after this. But, yeah, so they wanted to retake a lot of their lost land, which obviously they had done so in, like, Ukraine and Belarus, but they weren't able to do in Poland, and the Baltics, and Finland. So, the Soviets and the Germans, as I hope you know, signed a pact, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Basically, what it said was, hey, the Germans were going to invade. Everyone knew that they were going to invade. They didn't know when. That was the big thing. The Soviets actually were surprised when the invasion happened. No one thought that the Germans were going to attack so early, but they knew that it was going to happen. And so the Germans said, hey, listen, okay, we can beat up Poland. Poland's easy. And we don't really need to fight each other. We're at war with the Allies. The Allies are going to come to Finland's aid. And, we're going to Norway and Denmark and all that. We don't need to fight, okay? So, what they laid out was a plan in which... Because, by the way, this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but the Germans and the Soviets had not really been, like, best buds, obviously, because they really hated each other for ideology reasons. But they both had kind of like a mutual respect for each other in some ways. Obviously, Germans thought that they were awful, but it was kind of like, hey, you can help us out, so we're going to be like buds for a bit, but we're not going to be like good friends. So the Soviets are actually allowing the Germans to test out weapons that they weren't allowed to use in the Versailles Pact, or the Treaty of Versailles, in their territory. They were able to test out new tanks and whatnot, and some Air Force, things that like they could not use in German territory to break Versailles. So for a while now, the Soviets and the Germans had kind of been working together in a weird sort of way. And obviously they also had helped each other with, tank plans and the like, but this was kind of like a defining moment because everyone kind of had a suspicion something was going on. But the world kind of viewed Germany as like, oh, we hate communists. We're never going to, like, we have to destroy them. That was their big thing, and that's kind of why they were cool with it. It was like, fascism isn't great, but as long as it's not communism, we're good. So, the Germans and the Soviets kind of defined this, like, we're going to help each other out with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So obviously, like I said, it split Poland in half. Almost in half. I think actually the Soviets had a little bit more land, but the Germans got more actually good area. I think that just defines both of those countries very well. So then there was a non-aggression pact, and along with that, the Germans told the Soviets that, hey, okay, we're not going to attack, but we also want you to supply us with oil, food, and natural resources. That was a thing. And, the Soviets got stuff in return. But the big thing is that was going to help Germany, because Germany had to do like two things. One, they had to secure their iron mines in Sweden. Two, they need to secure their oil production from Romania. And three, they need to figure out how to produce their own oil. And at this point, they were kind of figuring out how to produce their own oil. But Romania wasn't a very reliable source until later in the war when they turned fascist. And they're working on getting Sweden. So by not even needing Romania in the picture, because they had the Soviet Union to feed them resources, this kind of allowed them to not really have to worry about anything. And obviously, later on, by self-evident history, the Germans would invade, and I'll get into that later, but because they were able to secure this pact, they didn't really need to worry. So, they both invaded Poland. Let's get back into the invasion. So, they both invaded Poland. As you can tell, the Germans have a pretty unique plan here. You got pushing from the north, from the south, you got a straight through push that spreads in, it does pincer movements, surrounds. You look at the Soviets, it's pretty boring. A bunch of straight lines, right? Doesn't look very cool on the map. That's the big thing. And this is later on, actually, legitimately on the next slide, I'm going to talk about the Winter War and why that was such a big failure. And this is one of the reasons, as you can tell. Look at Germany. They got all these crazy lines. They're using advanced warfare tactics, or pincering, or they're surrounding. And then the Soviets, they're just like walking in a line. It's not pretty cool. But overall, the war was a very big success for the Soviets and the Germans. The Germans invaded in, I believe, crap, I can't remember. I'm sorry. It was early September, a little bit earlier. Okay, yeah, sorry, it was September 10th. And then the Soviets invaded a week later, so September 17th. And the Polish lasted a little bit, but as you can tell, it's not very long. So, basically what ends up happening is the Germans just completely decimate this front line. I can't say completely decimate, there was a lot of really good resistance, but the big thing is that everyone was focusing on this side, because no one thought the Soviet Unions were going to invade. The Soviet Union was going to invade. They're like, no, that'd be stupid. They knew that there might be, but they really doubted it. And then the Soviet Union invaded. And the thing is that the Polish were not prepared. Like I said, they had all of their troops on the Western Front, and then the second that the Soviets invaded, they had no one. They sent as many reserves as they could, but those reserves were awful. They were troops. They were militia, basically. So what ends up happening is that they just pull back. They couldn't survive. So they just continue pulling back into Lvov, here-ish. So the Romanians allowed some of them to enter. Same thing with Hungary, but not very much. It was basically just a complete decimation. And obviously, that the Polish were the biggest affected by the Holocaust. But that really wasn't even half of it. Obviously, that was a huge issue. But at the beginning of the war, it was actually a lot too. And it wasn't like the SS coming in and taking people from their homes. The issue is that Warsaw didn't exist by the end of this. Like, I believe there's only like 90% of, or 90% of the actual original Warsaw is gone. I think it's only like 10% of old Warsaw still survives, because it was bombed. It was bombed heavy, and the Germans were merciless. There would be, as war happens, obviously big cities are big targets. It's the capital. So you see this in France too. Actually, worse in France, but. With Poland, you would have these lines of civilians walking to a different town or out into the country to get away from the war. And the Germans, they would just send pilots, and the fighters would just strafe these massive lines of civilians for no reason. And then obviously, whenever they actually got inside of the town, it got so much worse because the Germans would just round people up. Same thing with the Soviets. Soviets came in, and they sent them off. And they locked them up. You really focus on the horrendous actions taken by the Germans, because that's kind of, it's the Holocaust. Oh no. Well, Soviets, also did something like that, except it wasn't just one minority, it was everyone. Like, it was really bad. And I don't think I'm not going to be able to talk about this purge in a bit of this series, but I will eventually. And it was crazy. It was ridiculous what Stalin did. He has like 20 to 60 million kills. Because what's your kill count? But like, in all seriousness, that's 20 to 60 million. Like, I think Hitler has like 10, like 10 million people. So yeah, no, it just to kind of push away the horrendous activity done by the Soviet Union is kind of stupid. You really need to see it. So then the Winter War starts, and we're skipping quite ahead. This is quite far ahead. At this point, as you can see, actually, the Polish haven't been finished off yet, but the Soviets do invade Finland, and at this point, they are pushing around the Baltics. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they had all been given ultimatums saying, hey, you aren't going to be part of the Soviet Union, but if we can station, like, a few thousand troops, and some more, and also use all your ports, and you have to do whatever we say, then if you don't do that, we're going to invade. So, the Baltics were like, yeah, sure, we don't care. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, quick and simple, they just gave in. And obviously they weren't happy about it. But what are you going to do with the Soviet Union? They're massive. And they did about the same thing with Finland. They're like, hey, Finland, give us Karelia. Give us another few bits. I can't remember what they're called. Karelia's a big one. Then there's a bunch of islands. And also, we want to use every single one of your port. And we also want to secure that we can use trade. Because you're too close to Leningrad. That was their excuse. So, the Finns, because they're not pushovers, I'm kidding, but because of the person in charge, because they knew that stuff was going to happen, they said, no, we're not going to do this. Because Mannerheim, the chief of staff, and basically the ruler of the country at that point, because everyone was just giving up, he knew what was going to happen if they said no. It wasn't going to be like, oh yeah, Finland's independent. Woo! Yeah, sorry, I gotta check my phone. Okay, geez, I have to wrap this up. But I guess I'll just finish up with this part of the Winter War. He knew that this was just the first step. One, he would have to get a massive amount of territory, and that's not cool. You don't want to give a bunch of territory. But two, he knew the Soviets weren't going to be like, yep, that's all that we need. Thanks. Have a good one. No, they're going to continue. They're going to be like, hey, can we station troops? Hey, can you give us resources? Like, they're going to continuously demand more. So he said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to give you Karelia. So what ends up happening is Molotov, kind of important guy, Soviet head ambassador, goes off to Finland. He's like, hey guys, we understand. Like, it's fine. It's cool. Don't worry about it. We're going to be good. We're going to be best buds. Yeah, and he goes back to Moscow. It's like, hey, Stalin. They're not giving in. Stalin wanted this done in 2 weeks. By his birthday. This is his birthday present. So, pretty simple, right? I'm gonna slip to the next slide. Here, yeah, this is what they want. So they want the Gulf of the Finland Islands, Porkala, that's another big port, Pismano, Sala, Karelia. These are the big ones. So, the original idea was to push through Karelia right to Helsinki. Quick and easy. But Stalin was like, no, but look at the Germans. Look how crazy they are. Look at these advanced lines, crazy lines, right? They just oppressed the world. So Stalin was like, well, what if we have some push here, but we also have tons of troops here trying to encircle, and like he set up these massive I am sorry. My voice is dying. These massive plans that were ridiculous and used heavy mechanized, motorized, like really important stuff and really effective things. The issue is that this is Finland. And like Finland is a great country, it's a beautiful country, but it's also like 90% water and 90% forest, which means that they're 180% wilderness. But basically, you don't have a lot of infrastructure. You don't have a lot of roads. You got a lot of wilderness. You got a bunch of frozen lakes. So the thing is that sending in tanks without any roads doesn't really work. Especially, Stalin was using medium tanks, the T-35s, which were the multi-turreted ones, along with the BT-5s and the T-26s. You know, BT-5s, T-26s, they're reasonable. T-35s are slow. They're slow already. If you don't have roads, they're not going to be moving at all. And that's what happened. Because, sorry, I'm going to have to take a break real quick. Actually, no, sorry, I got a drink here. Okay. So, the issue is that style of warfare does not work in Finland. You see the same thing later in Vietnam. Going in loud and proud doesn't always win. So that's the big thing. Finland, the Soviets decided to justify on them by firing artillery shells at their own people. This is the infamous how to justify a war. You fire at your own men and then blame the other people for it. So, Finns were actually able to disprove that it was them, but no one cared. Stalin didn't care, Molotov didn't care. They saw that as an attack of war. They used that as a casus belli. And now they're at war. So they're using this crazy, push to the center, but at the same time push up here and up here and up here and do splits and encircle and all those crazy stuff. Did not work at all. So, this is a picture of a convoy, and this is what was happening. Basically, the Finns set up their main defense in Karelia using the Mannerheim line, which really wasn't anything too impressive, but it was still effective enough. It used their natural defenses. The Finnish government... Sorry. Hold on. Okay. So, the Finnish government kind of just left. They didn't really care. They left Helsinki. Mannerheim took power. And then a new puppet government run by Otto Kuusen popped up and started spreading propaganda saying, hey, join us, we're the real government, we're not going to run away, we can work things out with the Soviets. But they were a Soviet puppet. They legitimately had, their leader was going over and having breakfast with Stalin. Like, this was definitely self-evident to everyone that this was a Soviet puppet. The UN, which I use the UN, it was really just France, the UK, and other countries, did not help Finland. They promised some troops. Oh, excuse me. The Italians sent over some boys. The French were going to, but didn't. The UK, I think, sent over a few. Sweden, Norway sent over quite a few. But, like, basically, they were on their own. No one declared war directly on the Soviet Union. They just sent some supplies. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that, but we are back. So, continuing to wrap this up. Oh, so basically, the Soviets rushed in as fast as they could, up everywhere. And in turn, they spread their supply lines really thin. And, what ended up happening, was the Finnish used a strategy called multi, which means wood stack. And so what the strategy entailed was that you went in, you surrounded the Soviets in these little pockets, and then you cleared them out. And to do this normally, because it was so motorized, and you see most of these vehicles have, obviously a lot of them have wheels, but a lot of them also have tracks, which, are great off-road for the most part. But there's an issue. Then to get inside of them. So what the Finnish would do is they would use anything that they could to stop them. So maybe they'd use a vehicle, you park a Jeep in front of it, but more likely they destroyed the first vehicle by using either anti-tank guns or, if they had them, Molotov cocktails were a popular one, which was a bottle of vodka filled with gasoline that would then be lit. They would have a piece of cloth on the top. They'd stick it in, light it, and throw it. And then whenever it broke, the fire from the cloth would catch the gasoline on fire, and it would just erupt. The Soviets actually adopt this in their war against the Germans. They would use that and in other types of incendiary against tigers, actually. So basically, what ends up happening is the Soviets start getting the supply lines are really cut. They weren't prepared at all for this battle. They didn't send nearly enough troops, nearly enough supplies. They didn't even have good uniforms. They had bad weaponry, and they just were slowed down because of how Finland was. And obviously, the Soviets did win. You know, this wasn't a Finnish victory, but it was a moral hit to Soviets and an embarrassment to the Soviets. And it showed especially right after other conflicts that failed with the Soviets and the embarrassment that they had in Poland. It really showed the world that the Soviets we were massive. They had a massive army, but they also were kind of crap. They didn't actually have a good army, and so that's the big thing. The Soviets were freezing in these trenches in Finland. A Finnish farmer has the most kills of any sniper because of the situation that the Soviets were in. And piling this on top, I completely skipped over, is that basically there was no command. The command was gone. Rotovsky, I believe, was the head of this offensive. I could be mistaken with that. I'm sorry if I am. Was one of the head of the offensives. And he was kind of a mess. He had basically just skimmily missed being purged. And because of this, he was very hesitant to make any harsh, good action. And even on the field, the Soviets had just lost massive amounts of their generals, their officers, and actually a lot of their foot soldiers too. So they really, really dwindled in power. And so, in turn, the Winter War was just this mess. Everything that could go wrong went wrong for the Soviets, but they did win. It's something you have to remember about this war. But I'm gonna have to end it here because this is a very long video already. Next episode, I will try to get through Barbarossa, Stalin is Stalin, and hopefully Leningrad. From there, I'll try to do Moscow and Stalingrad. And then I'll wrap up with the Battle of Berlin-Kursk, and the Cold War, and what happened after Stalin died. And then from there, going even further, I'll probably talk about the Western Front. Coughing. That's a huge topic in World War II. No, but like the Africa Front, Pacific Theater, and back at home, just Germany in general, especially for your Panther Grenadiers who are watching this video. But anyway, I hope this was very informative. If it wasn't, hit the like button. If you have any critiques of how I explain, if I missed anything that you know about, and if you have any other resources or interesting things you'd like me to talk about, or read, or watch, or whatever to talk about later, send them to me. But other than that, I hope you did find this enjoyable, and I will see you guys, not in Moscow, in Barbarossa. Alright?